Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Warcraft Rumblers podcast, a new podcast dedicated to Blizzard's hot new mobile game, Warcraft Rumble. I am Brian, and I am here with my co-host, Dylan. Dylan, why do you love this game so much?
What's not to love? I mean, as a longtime Clash Royale player, I think this game pulls at all the things that I love about Clash and then amplifies them into something much deeper and almost more rewarding. It is early on. I've played Clash for like 7 years, and now this game for about a month. So who knows how long it'll last? But I have a hunch that I'll be playing this for a long, long time.
Yeah, I found it interesting with this game from the start, how much the campaign pulled me in. You know, when we play a game like Clash Royale or a lot of games like this, oftentimes they're so focused on the PvP mode, and then you unlock cards through PvP, and it only has a PvP mode. Or maybe you get to play against a bot, but it's just simulated in the PvP mode, and the bots are bad at playing against you. But this game, the campaign pulled me in from the very start as a way to unlock cards. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're listening just to the audio where you listen to podcasts, there is, I want to let people know before we dive in, also a video element, which you can find on YouTube. We'll have the links anywhere that you would naturally find those. We may sometimes pull up cards to look at them. We might pull up, some stats or talents or even live gameplay or recorded gameplay to make some points and to just increase learning. We're definitely very competitive and strategic minded. We want to try and be the best that we can be. So I want to make that disclaimer first. Now, Dylan, you told me about this game, and so I started playing this game at your recommendation, but I didn't tell you that right away. I wanted to be kind of like subtle, like, oh, by the way, I started playing Warcraft Rumble about a week ago, and I'm already at this level, whatever. Now, I did that, but obviously, because I didn't have your advice, I made a few mistakes when it came towards the economy and spending my resources. Do you have any idea what beginner mistakes I may have made in my pride and trying to, do things on my own?
I'm going to guess you bought the wrong talent for maybe a handful of minis early on. And it's a very common mistake. I see a lot of people on Reddit. I did it myself. And there's no way to really learn unless you hear someone tell you or you just mess up for yourself. But essentially, you can only have one talent on your mini at a time or leader, and you can only unlock them at a certain pace. And you unlock the first one pretty early, but to get to the second one, you need a lot of stars, and you need to upgrade your leaders and minis a whole lot to unlock that space, which allows you to switch back and forth between your talents. So what you want to do with your first talent is find the best one that gives you the best advantage to win. You can use resources like warcraftrumble.gg, you can use NOF, a couple other sources, even Reddit, but really find the one that you like the best. So that's mistake number one, probably. Mistake number two is not buying the right things in the shop as well. We talked about buying the talents, but what you want to do in the beginning is buy as many new minis and many new leaders as you can, so you can upgrade your collection level. And when your collection level is higher, you get more XP, more gold, more resources to use throughout the game. So I think those are kind of the two most common mistakes early on. Is there something I'm missing here that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Let's see. So you're absolutely right about buying the wrong talent. I think even before that, and I didn't really realize this, but like your first leader choice is really, really critical, because the way, if you're new, you may not really realize how much of the game revolves around the dungeon and the dungeon week. So the dungeon is a PvE experience. It's a sequence of 3 battles, but each week it's focused around one faction, and you can only do it with that faction. So at the time of recording, it is currently Beast Week, I think, in the dungeon, and next week I think will be either Horde or Alliance. The point is that each week is one faction, and when it's I didn't know this until recently, in the grid, which is where you mostly acquire new cards, it will only offer you leaders that align with the current faction dungeon week.
Right.
And there are certain leaders and certain factions that have leaders that are significantly stronger than some of the others. And so you can succeed in this game, I think, with almost any leader as your early choice and those sort of things. But if your first leader choice offers you a seriously powerful leader and you don't know any better and you skip that person, especially if it's not that faction's dungeon week, you might not have another good chance at that leader for a long time. Because other than the grid, you only get leaders every 5 or 10 levels, every 5 or 10 sigils, right? And often that has no guarantee to give you any particular leader, and that might actually again be skewed towards the leader that is the current dungeon week.
And to build on that, it takes a long time to get up to more sigils. So as you get higher and higher in sigils, that gap to get the next 5 to unlock your next leader or get a new leader choice is just that much more difficult to achieve. So you're right to point out that your early choice of your leader is pretty critical.
So if we just like, most people who are listening to this probably are already playing the game and they probably already made their first leader choice. Right. When I was listening to a streamer make this point, he was like, if you get your first leader choice, you probably can't go too wrong, but just come to us, tell me what the 3 are. We'll tell you which ones to pick, and just to protect you from picking something like Jaina, Proudmoore. And what's sad is that was my first pick, because I played a mage in World of Warcraft. I liked playing Jaina and Hearthstone. I thought, okay, I got to slow some enemies down. I've heard, seen the Blizzard spell is good. So I went for Jaina with my first pick.
And what does she do, Brian?
Not much. She doesn't really do anything, but her passive is that when she's in play, your spells cast as if they were 3 levels higher. And so with some spells, that's fairly interesting because certain spells scale specifically off of level difference. Something like Execute or Polymorph, the percentage health that it'll take away or the time that the thing will be turned into a chicken will be extended or reduced based on the level difference. But a lot of spells like Blizzard or Chain Lightning, sure, they're better at a higher level, but they're just like pretty solid at whatever level you have them at. And you have to have Jaina in play for that to even be relevant. And she only has a single target attack, and she's very squishy, so she just doesn't seem like a very good combat unit. I think, Dylan, you should now tell us, what are some leaders people should be really looking out for? Like, when they get offered 3, and they see one of these few leaders, they should be excited and say, all right, I got lucky to be able to take this right now with one of my leader choices.
Well, I'm going to give you 3 right off the rip that undoubtedly are the best, even according to the tier lists on all these websites. And then I'll give you one that's one of my personal favorites that I think is incredible in PvP and PvE. To start, we got Baron Rivendare. He or she is incredible in PvP. I'm going to go she.
I think it's a he.
It's a he. We're going to go with he.
Go with he.
What's that?
Go with he. Yeah, go with he.
So Baron in PvP just constantly controls all of the resources because he spawns 2 mages or regular skeletons down each lane. And him himself, is a 4-drop character that is tanky, is very fast, and does a lot of damage. So right off the rip, I think Baron, if you get him in the beginning, is one of your choices you should make. Another one is Ren Blackhand, who basically has 2 lives. He starts out as a flying dragon. He does a ton of AoE damage, and then when you take out the dragon, he falls and will immediately rush to the closest target, which is just super strong. He's super tanky. He synergizes really well with a lot of minis throughout the game. And then the other one that I'm going to touch on is Tyrion. This dude just never dies. He constantly regenerates his health and those around him. And he has a talent that at 30% health, he gets a bubble shield and is literally untouchable for 5 seconds, which really goes a long way and is really frustrating to play against. So those undoubtedly are the top 3. And then another one that I really personally enjoy is Old Murkai. He's the little fish dude, and 5 seconds after you play him, any amount of gold that you spend generates 1 little fish spear guy. So that's super powerful, especially when you upgrade to the 10-second version, which is a talent you can get. It just becomes a really frustrating card to deal with. especially if you don't have the right stuff in your deck to counter it. It's just pretty much a loss right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add an honorable mention from the fifth faction because I think that you mentioned each one that you mentioned was from a different faction from the fifth faction, which I don't think you mentioned
Oh,
was
that's
talk
interesting.
about the Horde. And I think that I've heard that Karen Bloodhoof is very strong in both PvE and PvP because he's a tank, he has a second life, he does an AoE attack, something of that nature. But I personally have really enjoyed Gromosh. Um, I think that the fact that he's fairly tanky and he does a high bit of damage and he gives the Bloodlust aura to allies around him means that there are certain PvE levels. I want to get into this later in later in the episode, the types of PvE levels and generally how you kind of beat them. But there are some where you win with sort of a Zerg strategy. If like you overwhelm the boss before the mechanics of the level overwhelm you, it's sort of a base race. And I find Gromosh to be really good in that type of strategy because if you have Gromosh providing the Bloodlust aura to like a swarm of harpies and maybe a swarm of mini dragons from your dragon eggs or something like that, you can kill the boss very quickly. Um,
Yeah, if he's tanking for them, right?
yeah, if he's tanking for them, or if maybe you brought in a Quilt Boar as a tank, or I like combining it with Stonehoof Tauren. Stonehoof Tauren and Gromosh, I feel like are just like the Bash brothers. Like that feels like a
Yep.
really good two card combo. They'll take a tower very quickly. They're very tanky. Um, but so that's several leaders that you could consider. Are there a few leaders that like really avoid these? Like hopefully you don't have to take these early, um, type of thing.
Yeah.
Tell us, yeah, please.
I mean, I think for one, you already touched on is Jaina. I just don't think in general she's very good. She's situational. She can be good, but to be honest, I maybe have played with her one or two times, and I was like, yeah, she's not for me. So she's not great. Another one I don't really care for is Chargla.
Char,
Chargla.
yeah, Charla,
Chargla.
Charoga.
Chargla. Yes. A name so bad that just fits exactly how she plays, and she has a unique ability where the next card in your lineup is the same cost for everything across your deck, so you can get some steals in there, which is cool. But it's so random, and her ability is not great. It's kind of frustrating to play against if you have something that's not ranged and it needs to get to the troop to kill it. It's frustrating because she does that like vine lasso thing that keeps him stuck for a little while. But yeah, those two were not great. And then the other dude, what is his name? He's in the
Is it Horde?
no, he's in the Alliance one. I'm not seeing him listed here. Oh, Maeve Shadow Song. Just not a fan. I mean, some people really like him, but to me, he's just average.
Yeah. So I think the main thing is trying to avoid those few weak ones, and
Yeah.
hopefully, well, now, okay. So I want to ask you this. Let's say that I get an early Baron, or I get an early Cairn that I'm feeling really good about, and it feels like it's winning. Let's not just kind of talk about it's the PvE campaign. That's the main way you're going to progress in the game, by the way. I think most people have figured this out. Is the PvE campaign with some PvP and some questing sprinkled in until you unlock dungeons, I think at 30 sigils. How much should I be focusing on one leader and one set of cards for a deck? And how much do I actually need to diversify while I'm kind of early and middle in the campaign? Like, what's optimal?
I mean, early on, I think it's acceptable to kind of stick to one build and one leader and, just kind of cruise through the levels. But eventually, you're going to get stuck. And then eventually, you're going to run into heroic missions, which require you to have builds for each family. So you're going to want to spread out your resources to multiple leaders, multiple families, and do your best to upgrade all minis across the board. I know for one, I didn't. I just completely ignored Meatwagon early on,
Hmm.
and for Onyxia, who's like the final boss, apparently Meatwagon with the +2 range booster or talent is critical, and that's like the main way that people are beating Onyxia. So that's going to come to bite me in the butt, or it kind of already has. So just do your best, but early on, just focus on what you like and what you're having fun with, and with what's working until you get stuck, which you will.
Yeah, I think it's so important. You touched on this earlier, but the collection level, it's so important that you unlock every mini, even if you don't like it, even if you don't want to play it. And so, let's say early on I get offered a Baron, and that's kind of my deck, and I'm crushing it with a Baron deck. The next time it offers me a leader, I could get +1 star to my Baron, or I could unlock a new leader. The chance to unlock a new leader, even if it's one of the bad ones, compared to a single star for a leader I already have, I just don't think that's worth it. Now, if my Baron was at 2 out of 3 stars already, and this would be the 3rd star, so it would upgrade my Baron from common to uncommon and allow me to then start seeing Baron talents in the grid. There could be some argument for that in that case, but still, the value of getting a new card, it's like half a collection level. It's so crazy because it just snowballs. Like, because the higher collection level you have, the more cards, the more copies of a card you get when you unlock it for the first time. I'm currently at a point, I'm sure you're beyond this, but I'm at a point where when I unlock a card, it starts at like level 9 or 10, which is like wild to me. But I'm also at a point where I don't have any more cards to unlock. So I don't know how soon that'll be happening anymore. I think I might have one leader that I haven't unlocked yet.
Well, the good news is they're gonna unlock, or they're gonna release a ton of new content, because Blizzard's universe is super in depth and has a ton of characters that are not included in this game, which I'm sure you know much better than I do.
Yeah, that's true. So, I have Dylan's alluding to, I have some background in World of Warcraft and just Blizzard titles in general more than he does. That's true. So they will be adding more stuff. I want to ask you, so I asked you, should I focus on one leader or do I need to kind of spread out? And you said you really should be spreading out, and at a certain point you will have to. How important is it, do you think, to focus on cards that you can play with different leaders? Because earlier you mentioned like Rend Blackhand is like a really strong leader, and Rend has this whole flying thing going on. So if I get an early Rend, maybe I then, get an early Drake and an early Gargoyle, early Dragon Eggs. I have Harpies. I have this whole kind of flying thing going on. And I just push those cards as hard as I can. But then kind of all my non-flying cards might sort of be floundering because I'm over investing in cards that are only good in my Rend deck. Whereas if I invest in a card like Stonehoof Tauren, I'll play that in every deck. It's so good in any deck. And that's, your advice. I started playing this card. So do you think that there's something to that when I have a choice, it's not unlocking a card, but at the end of a mission, they're like, do you want to get, 200 copies of Stonehoof Tauren or 200 copies of Gargoyle? Should I say, I play Stonehoof Tauren with every leader, I play Gargoyle in only 2 decks. Should that factor into which card I level up?
For me personally, I think I would probably lean towards the card that I'm playing across all decks. For example, you mentioned Stonehoof Tauren, who I think is one of the strongest characters in the game. His ability is just so strong, especially when you get the right talents with him. It just makes a big difference to have that one go-to card in all of your decks that you can kind of dominate with. But, also going back to dungeons, when you beat dungeons, you unlock slots in specific decks that give a boost to cards that fit that slot. I hope that makes sense to our audience. But sometimes that card that you level up across all your decks will no longer fit into that deck because you don't have the right slot for it. And you can always re-roll it, but sometimes it's just really hard to find the right slot that will fit that card. So generally speaking, I'm upgrading the card that's good across all of them. But in certain situations, go for the one that fits, like the Red Blackhand deck you mentioned.
Do you take the opportunity to upgrade your leaders over other cards? Like, let's say I just won a battle I'm playing Ren Blackhand, it's a flying deck. I have Ren Blackhand and Drake. They're both pivotal cards to the deck. Yeah. And after the match, they're like, hey, do you want to put some cards into Ren or do you want to put some cards into Drake?
Well, I'll tell you right now, no matter what, if I see the arrow saying like, hey, you're going to upgrade this card after you pick this one, like it doesn't matter. It could be spiderlings, which I think are terrible. Like I'm gonna pick that one just because that upgrades my base level and it gets me closer to getting more gold, getting more collection levels, whatever. So I'm always picking the upgrade.
Okay. Does it even
Yeah.
offer, do you know, does it offer leaders alongside non-leaders like that? Or does it only say, hey, do you want this leader or that leader? I'm not sure that it puts them side by side like
Well,
that.
I think it does. Yeah, it does offer in quests specifically. It offers
Okay.
rewards as leaders and minis combined, not combined, but next to each other.
Yeah, so if I might be in that situation where I see like I have a mythic or an epic level quest, so it's a 5 times quest. And okay, do I want to do this for my Rend or do I want to do this for my Drake? And so then it's kind of a matter of which one of these seems like a more, valuable resource. Some cards for my leader or some cards for my Drake. And I almost might lean leader because I can only really get combat experience upgrading that leader when I play the leader. But if I want to upgrade this Drake, the Drake is going to get upgraded every time I play Rend and every time I play it in any other deck. But Rend isn't going to get upgraded when I go play Tyrion the way that Drake might. I don't know if you played Drake and Tyrion. I don't really think that you would. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. And I want to ask you now. I'm trying to just everyone here, by the way. I'm trying to hit on all the stuff that I wish I asked in that first week. And a lot of my mistakes definitely came from the shop tab, not just from the grid, which I do want to come back to, but a lot of my mistakes came from below the grid, right? Where there's like daily offers and they're like, oh, spend gold here. None of that stuff's ever worth it, right? The only thing I should get is the one that says tap here to get free, and then I get out of there before I'm baited by anything else.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, it's not wise to spend your money down there. The grid is just better in the long run. It looks really nice when it's like plus 3,000 mini XP if you buy this tome, but you're gonna get that over time anyway. And having the choice of buying the specific leader or mini you want in the grid and being able to move things around in the grid is just so much more, so much better bang for your buck.
Yeah, the grid is absolutely where all your gold should be spent. Um, we may upload a separate video, not necessarily an episode of the podcast. We may upload a separate video in the future, kind of really just doing like a grid breakdown, maybe showing some examples of us running through it. Dylan, do you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of like how to manipulate the grid by now and like how it operates?
Yeah, for sure. Basically how it works is, it'll refresh every now and then when it recombobulates or whatever it says. But basically, when you buy a card, it's going to get rid of everything vertically and horizontally in that row and column. So when you buy that, just know anything above it, to the left and the right, will be gone after you purchase that. So what you could do is, if you have two things in the same row next to each other and you're like, hey, I want both of these, you can spend 5 gold to move one down, buy that row, get rid of the column as well, and then you can buy that one that you wanted as well with your next purchase. So you really want to game it and make sure that you're picking the right ones, and always check NOF or Warcraft Rumble to see if you're picking the right talents, or go on Reddit and ask somebody, or comment on this video or whatever on our Twitter, and just ask us and we can help you out.
Yeah, I found that there's a very interesting sort of strategy because I think that I learned just recently that at midnight or whatever, the whole grid doesn't reset, but just the bottom row, not the
Is that true?
not the whole thing. Yeah, you should look for that. Look at your grid tonight before you go to sleep and take note of what's in the top. And so I've noticed that there's this like interesting thing, right? Because when you buy, let's say you buy the bottom row, then the bottom row is going to like disappear and the top 2 rows shift down and you get a whole fresh row on the top. But if you buy something from the top row, the bottom rows just stay there and they don't necessarily like shift off the screen. So you might find yourself, if you have a grid that has several things in it that you want. I think the grid generally shows about 5 things with like 4 sort of empty spaces. or they might have the sort of like boosters, like when you buy a thing that is on this row, like you get extra XP or whatever. You might have to really sort of plan out what you buy in what order to make sure you get all the stuff you want, while also trying to maximize how many things you recycle because you don't want them. And so I found that to be pretty satisfying. Like if there's multiple things that you want, I often try and like kind of like line it up so I can buy something from the bottom and then they shift down, and I'm still buying something from the bottom and they shift down, because that churns the most fresh tiles in if I'm shifting in a fresh row of 3 every time, because it's shifting in the fresh row of 3 plus you have the fresh tiles you've earned from whatever vertical column you're in. I think it's just so important to try and recycle as much of the grid as you can. Really, really quick. Well, I guess on that point, I want to ask about the big red button that resets it. Dylan, have you used a single one of those? Have you used any of those yet?
I use them all the time. If there's something like, if nothing appeals to me and I have a big red button, I'm smashing that. Absolutely, dude.
So
Have you?
yeah, I've used them twice. I think I have maybe 10 remaining or something. So I still have
Wait, they stack?
the big red button. Yeah, I have a bunch. All right, we're gonna do our first scene change. I'm gonna pull up my live screen. We're gonna look at my game and see how many big red buttons I have. Maybe we can even do a bit of a grid demonstration if I have any gold to spend. All right, so here we have in front of us my grid right now. You can see I have 97 sigils, 425 gold, which is cool because it's some to play with. So if I hit this recycle grid button, it shows 11 remaining. So I have 11 to recycle, but I'm not convinced that I want to recycle this grid. Dylan, what are your thoughts here? Looking at my options, and I'm curious how subjective it becomes. I'm curious. I feel like each grid choice really becomes subjective, because I feel like looking at this telling me, what I should buy. You'd want to know my collection, what leaders am I playing, how close are these cards to leveling up, what talent, all that kind of stuff. But first thoughts, what are you seeing here?
First thought is the talent for Old Murkai right there is not the one you want.
Yep.
So without a doubt, don't buy that.
Yeah.
And prioritize other things, and maybe even put it into a row that would get rid of it if if you're for sure not going to buy it. Personally, I'd probably buy the whelp eggs, because whelp eggs are super strong. It keeps the rest of the board, which has some good cards in there as well, and it will refresh a bunch of new cards into the refresh grid. So, I mean, if you're up for it, I think that's what you should buy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting here to note that all these cards I already have at uncommon. You'll see my abomination is at 3 out of 10, 0 out of 10, 1 out of 10. So this is purely a matter of which cards do I want to progress from uncommon towards getting 10 stars and becoming rare, which you might think you only have. I only have to do that if I bought the wrong talent. I have to get it uncommon, so it'll let me buy another talent. But also, it gives you a level. You get a level from reaching uncommon, rare, epic, etc.
That's actually a really good point. So if you had the right talent on Old Murkai, and this would be for your second talent on Old Murkai, then I would say do that. If you like playing Old Murkai.
Do I get a level from buying a talent?
You do.
Yeah, okay. I don't have the proper Old Murkai talent yet, though. And you could actually deduce that, because you could see here, this 1 of 10 means my Old Murkai doesn't have 2 talents unlocked yet, which means I haven't purchased a single one yet. So now I am going to buy these whelp eggs. What I sort of speculate, though, is that this is not going to get much freshness rotated in here, because I think the bottom's not going to fall, the floor's not going to fall out. So the talent is going to get replaced, and it actually sort of highlights, I think we can see the 3 squares that are going to change, right? They're highlighted black, and then the egg is going to change as well. So it is going to give me...
so what's interesting is you will be refreshing more blank cards than active cards.
Yeah.
So you got rid of 3 and brought in... So it's the same exact amount. So 3 blank cards went out, 3 blank cards came in, 2 cards left, and 2 cards came in. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's always what happens, but
Is it
it is kind of cool
always?
to note.
I think it's always only 5 cards, then either 4 blanks. Yeah. So this right
I saw
here,
someone on Reddit who had like 9 cards available, or 8 cards, sorry,
that's
available. They only
wild.
had one slot, which is insane.
Oh,
I've
you
never
can
seen that.
probably, I bet you can change it by moving stuff around. Because if we moved all the stuff to load up the top and then I bought something on the bottom's going to rotate out and the top comes down. You know what I mean? We could probably shift
Yeah,
stuff around so we're rotating less out or whatever. Right here, so we don't want the root 2 additional nearby targets deal half damage. I can't imagine this is the right Chargla talent, nor do I want
no,
the
that's
Chargla talent.
Chargla, and Chargla sucks. So we ignore Chargla at almost all costs.
This is interesting because the Harvest Golem, you'll see, I don't have this at uncommon yet. I think this is not a very interesting card, but is it worth buying this? I don't know. What are your thoughts with this? Just the old Murkai star, maybe the Abomination star?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could. It's kind of an opinion here on what card you like most. Execute's great. Abomination is pretty good in certain situations. Old Merc guy, I think, is one of the better leaders. So it's really whatever you're feeling, or maybe just wait or bonk the whole thing and get rid of them all if there's something like nothing that you really like. But
You would
personally,
really
I'm
just you don't save your bonks. You would just say, I want to bonk this, like, because what if I
dude, I
bonk
got
the,
zero bonk.
yeah, let's just bonk it. Because what if we bonk this and we get the best talent in the game for that I don't have
Let's
yet?
do it.
You know, and maybe this will let people
I'm
feel
shocked that you're
comfortable
sitting on
spending
only
this
11.
resource.
Dude, look
Um,
at that.
so look at this. We got my Flame Waker is uncommon. Look at how many uncommons I have, bro. My Ogre Mage is already uncommon. Or sorry, yeah, uncommon. My Flame Waker is already uncommon,
And
I
what?
think. Which means like I already have a Flame Waker
Is that
talent.
Baron at the top left? Who's that at the top left?
Top left, this is a bad Baron Rivendare talent. We already have a good Baron talent.
Okay.
Um,
But look at the arrow. Look at the arrow at the top.
yeah, this is +1 of my Griffin Rider, getting it to 3.
To
So
me, that's what I would do, and it might almost be worth it to move the XP to the middle.
what I was thinking was maybe we buy like the Flame Waker and catch this on my Flame Waker, which is if you don't have this context about my account, my Flame Waker is relatively under leveled. You'll see like this is one of my crappy decks, but like if we look at one of my good decks, which is level 18, a lot of my cards are like level 14. Look at this, my Flame Waker's 14. It's the lowest thing in this whole deck. But I have a good talent for it. I have the talent. Successive attacks increase flame wave distance, and it resets when he moves. But you can often set him up so he doesn't have to move, and it's just slaying. So I think
Yeah,
with
and his
that,
range is already ridiculous as is, so that's a crazy talent.
so I think I agree with you. The range of the wave is big. He's relatively short range to start the attack, but it has long range. So I want to do this to get the plus 390 on my Flame Waker, and what I expect to happen is things will shift down. So I'm not going to lose what we want.
Yeah, you'll still have that upgrade. Oh, you got the best Abomination
Is
talent.
this the Abomination talent right here? Poison
Yeah,
nearby
just
enemies
poisons
every 3
everything.
seconds. Wow.
Oh, a good counter to Abomination is Harpies, but if you have this poison talent, it poisons
Oh
them, they die.
no, dude. That sounds
Yeah.
brutal. Thankfully,
Yeah.
well, interestingly, in PvE missions, sometimes the enemies have talents, right? Maybe in like heroic or something like that.
In
Um,
Heroic, they all have talents. Everything on the board has a talent,
everything on
and
the board
it's
has a talent. That's
incredibly
awesome.
frustrating. Yeah.
So I think this is now sort of interesting. I don't want to stick on this for too long, but I think you can see Skeleton Party is one that I already have at 5 out of 10, so I've been prioritizing it. So what I'm going to do is move this to the left, buy Skeleton Party. It's going to refresh a couple. Things are going to shift down. And I just feel like I have control when I'm doing my purchasing in the lower roll. That might just be kind of my strategy for it, but it feels like I know what's going to happen, and I'm giving myself the most opportunities to make every purchase be something I want and have a big impact on churning towards fresh stuff. I feel like this game is a lot about churn. Like, you grind missions, which gets you cards, which gets you collections levels. You get stuck, so you go grind PvP, which gets you new cards, which gets you unstuck, and then you do dungeons. It feels like it's always churn, but it's always fun. Like these different game modes are all fun. I mentioned how like Clash Royale didn't have a campaign; it was only PvP or whatever. for the most part, and a lot of these games are like that. So not only does this game have multiple ways to play, but they all feel fun and they feel interconnected, which just feels like such a home run. Like, I can be like, today I'm just going to PvP and like I'm actually making progress. But sometimes it's like, today I'm just going to grind quests. Like, maybe I'm keeping it kind of low key today and I don't want the stress of trying to PvP. And if you lose PvP, you get like nothing other than a tiny dribble of XP. It's just,
I always say, man, if you don't want no stress, run a quest.
that is awesome. I love that. Yeah, I was
I just
thinking.
made that up.
I know that's great. It's great. Yeah, I think that there's an interesting numerical kind of balance. I'm just gonna wrap up this grid thing.
Okay.
So we are gonna buy the Griffin Rider, and then we're gonna finish one heroic mission, which will give us gold for that abomination. But I'm not gonna buy this Griffin Rider yet because at midnight the bottom row recycles and the top 2 rows we don't think will. So what I'm going to do is leave this here because I care more about this abomination talent than I do about upgrading my Griffin Rider, which is a card I don't use very often, although it is good. So like, I'm happy to see this here. I don't use it because I don't have a talent for it yet. So we're going
to move both of them up if you wanted that.
Oh, if I wanted to save this into tomorrow, I could bump it up. But which I will do if I fail to beat a heroic mission and get 300 gold tonight. We're pretty close just because I have it here.
We only have one left for that bar?
I have 3. To do 3 on Gromosh, but I've been working on him, so I know how the battle plays out, but it's just a matter of beating it with these leaders. But I think we'll be able to do that.
I forget exactly how that one plays out, but Harpies are definitely strong.
The main thing is he sends the 2 like Wolf Riders that go straight for your base, and then follows it up with a couple Warsong Raiders. He's got just
Are they stealth?
No, there's no stealth, but they just go straight for your base. So what I've been mainly trying to do is hit them with like a polymorph and Harpies right when they get to the base. Polymorph them when because they come separately. So you either need to single target them down individually or get them right when they hit the base. I want to ask you, Dylan, while we have this here, what are your thoughts on talents changing the picture of a mini?
Dude, sometimes that really bothers me because I scroll through my deck and I can't find the card. And it's like, okay, I know I have this card unlocked, but I can't find it. But on the other hand, I think it's kind of refreshing. It's cool looking at new artwork, and someone spent the time to make that art. So it's cool that gets to show whenever you have that talent on there.
I hated it initially because I'd see like a streamer post a picture of their deck, or you would text me and be like, here's the deck that I, keep winning with. And I'd be like trying to copy it and I'd be like, what are these freaking cards? But I actually think it's really smart, because if you look at my Dragon Whelps right now, you know what talent I have equipped. Not based on the tiny little talent icon, but the big art. This is flames around the egg. Oh, this is, flame burst. When these eggs get popped, there's a burst of AoE damage.
Right.
And so I think it's really interesting because each talent changes the icon to a different one. So when someone says, here's a picture of my deck, you're not just like, bro, what are these pictures? But it actually tells you what talents they're playing. And I come from Magic, and you have experience with Pokemon where there's like alternate art versions of cards and things like that, or we're playing like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, and there's skins, and everything looks different anyway. So this is almost really refreshing to see skins, but in a meaningful way that's conveying information, because in a mobile game, like screen space is so limited. This is a way to convey this information instead of those tiny icons. I just love that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I never really thought about it that way before, because I always do look to the little icon for the talent. But if you know what you're looking at with the artwork, it tells a lot more information than you would think.
Like if we scroll through, can you tell like what talent I have for like Drake or Execute or Ogre Mage? Maybe you don't know.
Execute, I know is that the one that gives Bloodlust?
Yeah, it's sick. And what's interesting is most of these cards have one clearly best talent. So very quickly, this is going to be the better known Execute image.
Right.
Among people who are playing the game and talking about it strategically, whatever, because that's the good Bloodlust talent. And so that's the image people are going to have of Bloodlust. And some people will still be familiar, because if I unequip the talent, then it changes back. So some people will still know this because we all saw this for like 2 weeks while we played before you get the talent. But then as soon as you get the talent, all of a sudden everyone has that bloodlust. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, which I think looks cooler to begin with. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of these look cooler. I agree. And the Drake that I have, it leaves the trail of eggs behind it. And this ogre mage bloodlusts himself when he bloodlusts an ally. Yeah, I'm pretty.
There's still some cards that I don't even know exist. Like it's just because it's cards that I don't really use much. For example, the Drake that you just talked about, I didn't know that was a thing. That it leaves the eggs in a trail behind where it goes.
Because you bought. This is your example of buying the wrong talent. You told me you bought the Roost talent, so it perches.
Dude, it's the worst. It just chills there, and then by the time something gets close enough to it, they likely have a ranged troop that kills it anyway. It's super frustrating.
Yeah, and so like I made the mistake. My mistake with the talent, we can see my shame here with this Prowler. I said it grants nearby beast allies additional damage. Not only is that talent word for word available on another card, I think. There's a different card that does, I think, the same thing. But this is just wrong. Like, I think that this is the worst of these three. I'm pretty sure deal double damage.
Which one did you say? Sorry.
I have Pack Leader, grant nearby beast allies additional damage. I'm pretty sure that Predatory Instincts and on the Prowler both better. But let's flip scenes here. My phone is blurry. We don't need to see that. We're going to come to Warcraft Rumble, and let's look for the Prowler. This is something y'all can do. This is warcraftrumble.gg, by the way. So this says on the Prowl is the 65.5% popular. Gain stealth and then stun when attacking from stealth. Do you agree with that, Dylan? That's going to be the
That's
idea.
the one that I run. I actually, for Prowler, I have on the Prowl and Predatory Instincts. But it's situational, right? I just saw a build on Reddit for the new dungeon this week. And he or she chose to run Predatory Instinct when I thought it would be much better to run on the Prowl. Because stealth is just so strong in this game, specifically for, sappers and other cards like that go straight to the tower. But stealth and then stunning the target once you get out of stealth, it feels broken to me. So to me, that was a no-brainer.
And, Pack Leader, it's not Roost. It's not like we talked about with Meatwagon. Now that we have this here, I actually this is my real shame. Everyone who's listening, I will read out so you're not missing anything, but look at the low percentage on that. So Meatwagon has 3 talents. One of them, which is incredible, this is the Meatwagon talent you want, and Dylan mentioned this. One of them is Filet Trebuchet, which increases the range by 2, and that enables you... Meatwagon by default already outranges towers, the traditional towers, but this enables you to outrange some bosses. I think things that are balanced around the fact that Meatwagon can't outrange them. Because if you have your Meatwagon highly leveled, there's just half the missions you can just Meatwagon cheese. You can just, I can just win this with Meatwagon. And so I think that's something really interesting as well, that how the subtleties of your own collection and how that's developed will influence which strategies you should be using. Because my Meatwagon got a little bit ahead, so then I stomped a bunch of missions with Meatwagon, and then naturally that leveled up my Meatwagon, and so now it's like still ahead, but it becomes harder and harder to just force Meatwagon as the later game missions require more and more finely tuned strategies to beat. Right. So that's fun. But anyway, without me even needing to tell, if anyone can see these talents, Filet Trebuchet, 91.4%. Greased Gears, it gains Fury, which is you gain attack speed with each attack. Is that what Fury is? It's like the Firehammer has Fury.
I don't think it's each attack. I think it's just straight up like you gain 50% attack speed.
I'm pretty sure that Fury
increases while in combat. You're right.
So it ramps up. Okay. And that kind of makes sense. Like Fury, like you get more mad. Like, why are you still not dead? But I got Meat and Bones, which is 1.64%. And I believe Roost and Meat and Bones might be the only 2 talents in the game that actively make the card worse. No, that can't be true because there's also like the grunts that have a talent that makes them stand still. And
Yeah, that's the same one as Roost. It's exactly the same.
Yeah,
They just stay at the tower.
it just
But that one's even better because those guys are super tanky.
yeah,
And,
they're super
they
tanky,
can
and
even.
then they'll when they get in combat, they then go out and do their thing, and they probably will survive to go do that. But the Drake is never going to survive to go do the thing. But Meat and Bones
No. And,
replaces.
so let me, real quick,
Oh, go ahead.
there might be a mission where Roost on the Drake is like what you want, right? I haven't played all the missions yet. I'm not done. But it just feels unlikely. So that's what I loved about the game. Something can be objectively bad for a moment. I was frozen there for a second. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, keep rolling.
But then in another mission, it could be the exact card you're looking for. So I love that about this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are lots of flexible and successful strategies, not just for PvE or dungeons, but also for PvP, and also different strategies for like how you're pursuing upgrading your account, leveling up your account.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, what was it that you said? If you don't want to stress, just run a quest. Was this?
Don't want no stress? Run some quests.
Don't run no stress, run some quests. I totally agree with that. There was a time when I got stuck and I just ran quests for a day, and every card in that deck that I was convinced was the right strategy, and these were my cards. I wasn't going to change a single one. In a day, I got all those cards from like 10 to like 12, and then that enabled me to beat the mission I was stuck on. And because I'd spent the whole previous day trying to beat that mission again and again and again with the same level 10 cards, not changing a card, not even. I don't know if you know this, Dylan. You probably do. I'm sure people have experienced it when you refresh a mission multiple times trying to beat it. You're stuck in the same play patterns. Your deck is in the same order every time. You're trying the same thing. The opponents, the enemy NPCs doing the same thing. Something you can do is switch cards in your deck, the positions in your deck. So if at the start of a mission you have Drake in your hand, but you really need that to be your Stonehoof Tarn. You need it to be your tank. Go into your deck and select Stonehoof Tarn and swap it with the Drake, and then go start the mission. And you will start the mission with Stonehoof Tarn in your starting hand.
You serious?
I am serious. At the cost of right, because you'll have your slots, and so you might have your Drake in a flying slot and a Stonehoof Tarn in a tank slot, and you switch those, and you've now lost your bonuses. But if you are literally unable to beat a mission because of the way your deck is stacked and the way it's randomized, that because it locks you in, and I think that it doesn't always do it the first time, because sometimes I'll like start a mission and I'll be like, oh, oh good, I have my safe pilot in my hand, so I'm going to use it to go contest that chest. But I like fuck up the timing, so I'm like, oh, we'll restart it, and then the second time safe pilot's not in my hand. So I have to do it a third time, and then the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time are all just running back what it was the second time with no safe pilot. And now I can't beat this mission because I don't have my safe pilot to contest that chest, which is critical in this mission for whatever. So
Interesting.
if you're doing heroic missions, or you're just experiencing, right, like maybe the enemy is rushing you down and you need your Blizzard, or you need your Polymorph, you need your... And whatever it is in your deck for this mission, if it's not in the top few cards and you can't cycle to it in time, that's a real trick that you have, is to switch. Because what I was doing was I spent an entire day bashing my head against the same mission, just failing. It was the one with the two monkeys. One like punches me and the other one shoots a Benini gun at me. Has like a BB gun that shoots bananas. I was stuck on that mission for like...
I wish I knew this tip, because I got stuck just like that. And it was a heroic mission where 3 huntresses come at you from 3 different lanes.
Yes.
And they're stealth. And they throw in a wolf, and they throw in a flame waker, all at the same time, or coming up at your base, stealth.
But like from different angles also.
From all different lanes, dude. And I was stuck for so long. And then I found out that footmen were kind of the answer to that, because they can split lanes, they're tanky. And they resist, I think, physical damage. So that's good against the Prowler. But it was just really frustrating. So that's a really important tip that I think you guys could utilize down the road.
So in that situation where your footman stuck at the bottom of your deck at the start?
Yeah, they were like my 3rd or 4th card to get to. Well, they were not in my starting hand, so I don't know where they were, but it ended up me having to play like I think even my Kobold because he was in my starting
Mm.
hand, and that's just like a cycle. I had to get rid of it, and eventually I did it, but it would have been a lot easier if I started with the Footmen.
I'm gonna want to dedicate an episode to picking your brain about heroic mission strategy for sure, but I think a big part of it is, you know, the first rush. There are different types of heroic missions. This is something I wanted to ask you about. Is how do you see yourself winning? Um, but I think that there's a lot of heroic missions where it's just if you can survive the first 15 seconds, and it's crazy that you in some of these missions you literally lose that fast. You lose in 10 seconds if you don't answer it properly. And so if the card that you've decided like this is what I have at an appropriate level with this faction that can answer it, if that card is not accessible in the first 15 seconds, you will just lose. You just lose. And so this is a tool to beat that. But yeah, super nifty little thing. I wonder. I feel like they have to have a mechanic like this where like your deck ordering is locked in because otherwise you would just restart in pursuit of like the perfect one. And then that sounds better because you're like, oh, I could refresh and get the right order. But then if you fumble it with your chance with the right cards in the right hand at the right time, and you have to just sit here and refresh mission looking for the right starting hand, especially with this game's loading screen times, that would be brutal.
Yeah.
So final thing I want to close with, how do you find yourself winning PvE games usually? Like how could people win more? Is it like you build a big push, you overwhelm the boss? Or is it you lock down every base and every tower and farm all the gold and then dry them out? Or is it, play defensive until they run out of gas? Like, what do victories usually look like in the campaign?
I think the most important thing is just be patient, right? You don't have to win with your first push. You don't have to win in the first 30 seconds. Most of the time, it's going to come down to the wire, like even in overtime, especially in the heroic missions. So build up your pushes, get what you can, and understand that the enemy's probably going to kill your entire push. So don't be afraid to just let those guys die. Save up your resources, go get more with your Kobold, and rebuild your push, even from your main base. And that push is going to push a little bit further, and you're going to eventually, hopefully, win. So patience is key. Using your resources effectively is great. And just understanding kind of how it works where, you want to have your tank out front. You want to have your range guys behind your tank. You want your boss to lock on to your tank before the harpies come in and, clean up. Simple things like that.
All right, I have one more final question. How much do you think the way you play out a mission relies upon reading the map? Because I feel like every map is different, right? And they have the way that they're set up. Some of them are set up where it's like you could go for this tower or that tower, but the way that the switches and the paths that the minis walk, if you go for that tower before this tower, you'll never be able to keep it. Like you have to get this one to have a strong base in order to go get that one. Or like, oh yeah, that gold mine is in the middle and it looks like you can kind of contest it. But if you try and go for it, like you're at a disadvantage and you have to say, this map is not set up for me to have access to that gold mine until later. Like, how much do you find yourself really like analyzing the map and saying like, this is how I'm supposed to play this based upon how the X's and O line up on the board?
Yeah, I think a lot of the maps play very similarly. It's just the ones that clearly are different that you're going to have to kind of take a step back, understand the flow, and really build out a plan for what you think is going to be best. And often those ones where you kind of have to plan for it, you're probably going to have to play them a few times to really get a feel for it and see what troops they send. Do they cross over? Are they above or below? Can they snipe me if they're above? Things like that. So map is definitely critical, but in general, not as important as just having a good strategy on what cards to use, how to use your resources, and other things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on the note of like watching what the opponent's doing, I think there are a few niche cards that people probably don't play in their decks early on, especially early on. I know I had this dream. I was like, I'm going to craft the perfect deck that I'll never have to change a card. It'll have a little bit of flying, a little bit of siege, a little bit of tank. It's going to be the perfect recipe that is just going to defeat every mission they could ever put in front of me because I'm so skilled at building and piloting this deck. And so obviously there were cards that, I was never playing. And I think a lot of people probably feel that way. There are certain cards that are like silver bullets that you'll just be like, oh, wait, this opponent doesn't have any anti-air. This opponent is all ground troops with no anti-air. If I just play Bat Rider, like, I can't lose. This is a joke.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's another mission where there's like some big dude that walks into the center of the map and he shoots like cannonballs like all around at the map, but he can't deal with flyers. So you just wait until he takes a few steps forward, but then you just send harpies down the middle lane, and the harpies just kill him, and he has no counter to it.
Yeah, I know exactly which mission you're talking about, and what I did was I sent my my stealth bandits. I forget what they're called, but they're stealth. They get to them and then they stun them and just do like mini damage. I sent them, and then I sent my huntress behind them, but far enough back that it was time. Like she didn't get hit once it was stunned, and it just melts that guy right away. And then it follows through, and there's some carryover damage to the actual boss too. But that mission's tough.
Yeah, it is a tough mission until you find like, here's how I'm gonna, adapt to it. Can you think of any other? Do you kind of agree that something like Bat Rider, that is an example of like a silver bullet? Like there are certain missions where this is just going to be the thing that you need. And do you agree that that's kind of a silver bullet? And do you have any other ideas of certain minis that maybe just kind of keep in the back of your mind? Like if the conditions are right, this mini is going to just be perfect for you. Chickens. Oh no.
Chickens, bro. Yeah, use the chickens, man. So, like objectively, just not a great card.
Angry
but
chickens.
If you're running against a tank, like they'll just eat these guys up. So just every card has a purpose and every card has a place. So just never forget about little chickens, okay?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think chickens are great. I think there are certain what is deep breath?
So that's what you get for beating Onyxia.
Oh, this is a spell that you get awarded with for beating. Oh, that's why it says I have 53 out of 54, but it doesn't show me the one that I don't have. That's so
Apparently
funny.
it's insane. I haven't even seen how it works, and I don't plan to until I beat it.
I think another really good role player is Gargoyle. I think there are certain missions where
Gargoyle's so good.
it just flies over the top. Harpies it's not really a silver bullet. I think Harpies is just like a super good card. It's like a silver bullet, but then you realize like everybody's a vampire or a werewolf or whatever. It's like a bullet that kills everything. It's just so good. Meat Wagon, we mentioned earlier, there are certain missions where Meat Wagon is just like the thing that you need. It's going to outrange what they do and take the first tower and then go from there. A few others, I'm sure. Once you have the talent, this is the last one I'm going to mention, and this launched me in Sigils. Once you have the talent for dragon eggs, where are they? Egg? Whelp eggs. Once you have Flame Burst, there are certain missions that you just put the eggs on the enemy, on the leader's head like 4 times, and it just wins the game. So play this with a Quill Boar or with a Safe Pilot. If it's a boss especially that does a single target attack instead of an AoE attack, because then you send the Whelp Eggs and the Safe Pilot a little off to the side, and the Safe Pilot has so much time to attack because the boss attacks an egg, attacks a drake, attacks an egg, attacks a drake, attacks an egg, attacks a drake. And your Safe Pilot's fired like 6 shots in that time. And the thing has gotten hit by 3 Whelp Egg explosions, and maybe they got some little fire breaths in. All right, well, with that, I think we've covered a lot for this lovely first episode. Dylan, do you have any closing thoughts or anything, anything that you feel like people really need to know about the game or about us to incentivize them to come back for episode 2?
No, nothing specific. The only thing I'd say is just make sure you're having fun and understand that this game is meant to be played over a long period of time. And if it feels like you're progressing slowly, that's intentional. That's kind of how games should be. I prefer it that way. I'd rather play for a long time than less than a week and be done already. And we hope you enjoyed this show. We're going to be doing this ideally weekly and talking about various things. Let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and maybe you want to call in sometime.
Yeah, we I think don't have time for it this week, but we are going to have some recurring segments, including letters from the community. So if you want to send in a question, maybe something that you've been dealing with, please email us at warcraftrumblers@gmail.com. And yeah, we'd love to get some fan mail. One thing we didn't mention is the Arclight Booster. Is that what it's called? If you're going to spend money on the game, the Arclight Booster is the thing. It's the only purchase that I've made, and I hope that it remains the only purchase that I will ever make. We will see if that changes if I start getting more disposable income on my hands. But for $20, it increases the gold that you gain and the experience that you gain, which is pretty sweet. One of the things I really liked is that it banks up the gold boosts that you like missed out on. So if you play for 3 or 4 weeks without buying this thing, it tracks how much gold you missed out on by not having the booster from day one. And when you eventually buy it, back pays you all your missed out bonus gold. But it does not do that for bonus experience, which is how you level up your minis and then your collection and all that stuff. So you can kind of be patient, and when you do buy, you'll get a big influx of gold. But if you think you're going to ever spend $1 on this game, you should spend $20 on the Arclight Booster and get the big XP bonuses from the very start. I'm glad I did that. I recorded the video of me running through the grid for like 20 minutes with my like 3,000 gold once I bought the Arclight Booster. Maybe we'll post that on the YouTube channel, but or we'll look at it. Fun. Or we'll look at it in a future episode to try and look at the grid strategy a bit more. All right, with that, I think we are out. Thank you for watching, everyone. We will see you next week. Please contact us at warcraftrumblers@gmail.com. And yeah, from Brian and Dylan, see you next week. Dylan, do we have an outing thing? We're saying rumble on or something lame like that? Oh, what a terrible outro. There's got to be something there. We're going to cut all this out, and then I'll be like, see you next week.
Bye. Have a beautiful time.